Hi, migrants with migraines. Welcome back. This is Sherouk, and you're listening to part two of the Women's History Month celebration episode. As you can tell, we had a lot to talk about, so we had to make a part two of this episode. If you haven't checked out part one, I highly recommend that you listen to it. Today I'm back with Ali and Diana, but we also have a special guest, which I'm going to introduce very soon. So our guest for today, her name is Lady. She's one of the podcast biggest supporters, and we really appreciate that she's with us on this special episode. Thank you so much, Lady, for being here. I'm sure everybody is curious to get to know you, so I will let you introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk here about my experiences in migrants and migraines. My name is Lady Jimenez-Torres, and Lady, that's my real name, is not a nickname. And the history behind that name would be a story for some other time. I'm an immigrant myself. I arrived in the US from Ecuador at the young age of 10, and a millennial. I'm 34, right in the middle of that generation, and I'm a mother of three. My oldest was born when I was just 16, so I was also a teenage mom. And my mother always placed such an emphasis on education because she didn't have the opportunity to continue any type of formal education after elementary school. And I think that's what always propelled me forward. I started my higher education journey at the local community college, then graduated with a bachelor's in sociology from New Jersey City University, Go Gothic Knights, and went up to obtain my master's degree from Rutgers University, Go Scarlet Knights. Oh, while my three children were less than 7 years old, I currently work as the policy director at the New Jersey Consortium for Immigrant Children. And prior to this role, I worked in government for close to 7 years in municipal government, where I oversaw constituent services, and I worked in a state legislator's office, and I was handling legislative affairs there at the state level. So
I have to give a shout out to New Jersey City University because that's where I went. I didn't know
yay!
that.
I love NJCU. It
Me
was
too.
right here in the city that I lived, and I've lived for a long time, and it was very easily accessible by public transportation.
Yeah.
Um, it was really like the place for me to go. So, and they gave me a scholarship because I transferred from a community college. So I said, that's where I'm going. I didn't have a car.
Yeah, NGCU is great. So thank you for the introduction. We had the part one of the episode, and Diana, myself, and Ali, we talked about like what we face as women in the US, and we talked about different things like ranging from like the workplace inequalities in the workplace, or like societal pressures, and like we talked about a lot of things. So we want to hear more from you about the challenges that you faced, especially that like you're more like established than us, like we're still like trying to figure out like our next steps where we don't have a family yet. So we would love to hear more about the challenges that you faced.
Sure. So I think my experience is one that I haven't really heard much in the larger context of the immigrant narrative. When you're 10 years old, it's when you start carving out what your identity is in the world. So it was really hard to come to a whole other country with a whole other language, and at a time where I was trying to just starting to create my identity around who I was, And I felt that coming at that age really kind of propelled like a very pronounced issue with my identity, and it kind of helped me create like a very easy for me to like code switch from one person to the other, because you have to be like a person that's already immersed in the culture when you're in school, and then you have to be like a person that's immersed in the culture when you're in college. And when you're at home, like you're somebody else. And then you're like wondering, wait, am I Ecuadorian enough? Like, am I even a Latina? And it's very, very hard. And I think code switching just kind of becomes second nature to you all the time. And add to that, the cultural pressure to always be, as a woman, like service to others. And the fact that you're like also an immigrant woman is like this expectation the society has of you, that you have to be of service to others. So you yourself start feeling so much shame and so much guilt about all the sacrifices that your parents made, all the sacrifices that you made. And so you overcompensate in a lot of aspects in your life, I think. Thinking back as a young child, I think I overcompensated a lot, and I wanted to make sure that I was the best student, that I learned quickly, and learn English very quickly, because my mother would remind me, ¿para qué vas a la escuela? Why are you going to school for if you're not learning? And reading legal documents at the age of 10 and 11, like that's a lot. You also had to be, I'm the oldest child, so I had to be like an example to my sisters, because ellos van a seguir tu ejemplo. So if I don't do this or if I don't do that, when I became a mom at the young age that I did, that was one of the biggest like things that I had. I felt so much guilt because I felt I had disappointed everyone, disappointed my mother, disappointed everybody that I had left behind. So that shame and guilt, that's not something that you get rid of like so quickly. And now looking back, I think that what I really, really had was like childhood burnout. And I had nobody to give me any type of mental support in school other than just telling me, wow, you're such an amazing kid. Like you learned so quickly. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm like dying here. If anybody has seen Encanto, when I first heard the song Under Pressure, I couldn't even finish the song because I started crying, because I'm like, oh my God, that's me.
Oh no.
That's me. You're like carrying the world in your back. So that hustle mentality is really, really hard to turn off. And I create so much stability as a child that when I became a mother, and a young mother at that, I didn't have the patience to be cognizant of how my parenting it was going to lead to adverse experiences for my own children's experiences in their childhood. So as I became an adult, I was a lot more intentional about how I talk to myself and about taking time to reflect on my own experiences and why do I act the way that I do. And it takes you to very, very, very uncomfortable places. Like it made me question my whole way of parenting. My mid to late 20s made me question my whole way of parenting. So those have been my challenges, I guess, as an immigrant woman.
Everything that lady said was like so much to take in, and yet I felt so like related to you with every single thing that you said. And it's just like so crazy, like from the code switching to the stuff about your children and having to learn how to talk to yourself, to talk to them. It's just like I want to give you a pat on the shoulder. Like a virtual pat on the shoulder.
Thank you so much, Lady, for sharing. That was very touching. And like the part that hit me the most is when you were talking about raising your kids as a young mom. And that's something that I talked about in part one of this episode, that like I'm trying to prepare to be a mom. I really want to be a mom, but I also really want to be a good mom. And like I am constantly thinking about like what can I do to prepare? Like am I going to be prepared? Like I want to be the best mom that I can. So I'm wondering, what I'm sure it was challenging for you and you mentioned this, but what helped you to get through?
Well, I definitely kept looking back. I mean, by the time that I was 21, I had all three of my kids, and I hadn't even started going to college. So I always felt guilty of how I was parenting them, because as time went on, I learned more things, right? Because I was exposed to more things, and I felt like, oh my God, like why was I so like rude to them or so strict with them when they were toddlers? Like, of course they wanted to explore the world. I'm over here like pushing them in. I think one thing that has helped me a lot is being gentle with myself. And in that sense, and I don't know if this is something that you can relate to, but like also being gentle with my mother and understanding that I did the best that I could with the information that I had at that time, just like my mother did the best that she could with the information that she had at that time. And that really has made a difference for me, and it kind of like shifted my perspective. And I think as long as I had good intention in how I parent my children and I leave room for growth, then that's what makes you a good parent.
I was gonna say something, but like I'm trying to stop myself from crying, bro. Like everything that lady is spitting is straight up bars, and it's kind of hitting. It's hitting a little too hard, bro. Like it's
Bro, I thought it was just me. I'm here like, damn, I gotta take a deep breath. This feels like mad healing right now.
Yeah, I agree. That felt like a therapy session, to be honest. Like, it was very comforting to hear that Lady went through all of this, but she's okay, and we're gonna be okay. We just have to take it one step at a time and just try not to be too harsh on ourselves. Yeah, speaking of being too harsh on ourselves, because that's where we left off. I struggle with this. Like, I'm super harsh on myself, and like I keep asking myself, like, why am I so unkind towards myself when I am super kind towards others? And for some reason, it's so hard to be kind to myself. And recently, I've been having this really bad anxiety that when I go to sleep, I dream of the things that are on my mind. And I can't tell if these are really dreams or if I'm not sleeping and I'm just thinking. It's so hard to describe, but like all of those thoughts or dreams have to do with everything that we discussed on this episode, which is why I really appreciate this conversation because it does feel very healing.
Well, that sense of overcompensation is something that kind of goes into your workplace and your career. And if you're not careful, it's something that employers can really take advantage of because you're always questioning whether you are worth it or not. So whenever they might give you a promotion or whenever you get a new job and you're like, getting a different title, a higher title, maybe a little bit of more of a salary, you start questioning, oh, am I really worth it? Like, is this like, am I just faking it here? And I say one thing that I will always take to heart is that I had a friend that told me everyone is faking it. Even the president and the CEO of a company is faking it. And it's just a cultural thing that you think that you have to prove yourself. The fact that you got a job, that you got offered a promotion, that's proof in itself. The fact that you went to school and that you finished school with the standing that you did, that's proof on its own that you are worth it, that you deserve it, that whatever is coming your way, you deserve it. So you really have to, as a young professional, as a woman, and for me, in my case, as a Latina, I really have to emphasize the fact that you are worth it and that you're worth it just for you. You're worth it and you're there to take up space. And your space, you deserve that space. If you're sitting at a table making decisions, you deserve that space. And if you were invited, you definitely deserve it. And anything else that you do on top of that is just cream on top. You don't need to be overcompensating. And I think that that's what leads to a lot of women kind of workplace burnout, because you're always overcompensating at work. And then you want to overcompensate as a mother, and you want to overcompensate as a partner. So then your whole life is just servitude. And where is the time to focus on you?
You're spitting facts right now, lady. You really are. I remember I was reading something the other day that was talking about how a lot of growing up and like becoming an adult is really just you coming back into who you were as a child. And that's how you really like connect with yourself and who you are before like the world and your family and society. and like everyone puts these labels on you.
I think that's definitely true. If I look back and I start really thinking about Lady before she even immigrated to the United States, when she would play out in the rain in the streets over in Guayaquil, I was always very curious and I always enjoy learning. And I think that I try to hold on to that a lot. And that's what works for me. You know, I in every place that I've been to, in every new job that I've had, I always go in with a fear of like, oh, I don't deserve to be here. I mean, who do I think thinking that I can do this job? And then I sit back and I'm like, you know what? It's okay. You're a learner, you like learning, and that's what takes you places. And so that for me has been kind of my identity, and the identity that I most resonate with when I was a child, just being curious and always trying to learn something new.
Yeah, I can definitely say as well that like it hits you hard in a workplace, especially as a recent grad. And like I recently experienced this that I'm like, oh, I just graduated and like what do I do now? Or like where do I stand in my workplace? And it's like it's very overwhelming because you see all of those people at work that are more accomplished than you and you're just starting, and like it's very overwhelming, and like it does help to remind yourself like, yeah, I got this, I am a learner, like you said, Lady. um and just again take it one step at a time, although it's hard. It's like easier said than done, but we just have to keep going.
It helps me to think about where am I in my own pyramid of my own like lifetime. You know, I'm not at the most basic level where I was just basically trying to survive. I'm at a different level. And I think that type of mindset, that switching of the perspective of where I am versus where I was, really makes a difference for me, versus thinking myself of like, okay, I'm in my mid 30s. Like I see some of my peers that are like vice presidents of companies, or you know, like commissioners or directors, like in very large and prominent companies, and I can't compare my journey to them because my journey is my own journey, and only I know what type of sacrifices it took for me to get to where I needed to get to today. So I focused on my own accomplishments because that helped me, and it kind of gives me that motivation to continue to grow and to continue to climb on that pyramid. And you know, not everybody else's pyramid, my own pyramid, because that's the one that I can have control over, and that's the one that I can create.
This is a lot more healing than I expected it to be, honestly. I'm taking a minute.
Yeah, I think you know, especially after we had like our solo session, like where it was just the three of us, and you know, we all kind of come from a similar anxiety spectrum where like all of us have to start the adulting. Our whole career paths are starting, you know, after I graduate, after Diana finishes all her like tech coding like journeys and your education, and then we have to navigate, and something that we've never navigated before after what, almost 12 plus years of just straight up education from elementary to high school. And then seeing and hearing Lady's perspective from after, you know, just now you're in the thick of it all. Like you're definitely not at the end of it because you have more ambitions. I'm sure you have more passions and more aspirations for not just, you know, just because you're a mom, not just for your kids so you can set an example for them, but you yourself as Lady have your own aspirations. And like hearing everything you went through is like definitely giving me some hope. I was just gonna stick to like corporate and sell my soul so I can at least provide for my brothers, you know? I think hearing everything that you go through and seeing that there is like a lesson to be learned and more lessons to be learned I can't wait to at least get to a place where I can be more gentle with myself, as you have shown us that we can be.
Yeah, to piggyback off what Ali said, everything you said made me feel very hopeful for the point in my life where I'm not living to survive, but I'm living to live as Diana. And that's something that you have given me a lot of hope for, because I feel like right now I'm at a point in my life where everything is like, oh, I'm in my prime. I have to get things done. I have to like, da 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 da. Like, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to get the chance to. And that's just like the wrong way to think about things. And I know it is, but like hearing your story is really like, it's basically just telling me to humble myself and to just take it one step at a time, which is something I definitely needed to hear. So thank you.
Yeah, like that was very nice to hear as well, because like for us, we see like we're always like we're not doing enough, but hearing your perspective and how much it took you, and like it just like trying to look at it as a process or like a learning experience, and like one day we will get to when we want to be. Like it's not a race, it's a journey that we should enjoy, but like sometimes we just can't focus on the journey, and like unfortunately we can't help but like compare like what other people are doing. Yeah, it's hard, but we're trying.
You guys will all be like you, like your own selves and your own personal brand. I like to go back to something that Ali said about like, selling her soul. And I think that's a very cultural thing, like that we like to say, like, oh, I'm selling my soul because I want to make more money, or I want a better title, or I want to get something, I'm ambitious, and ambitious in, especially from my experience in Latina women, is seen as something bad. And it doesn't have to be bad. Ambition is what sets food on the table. Ambition is what, my mother had so that she can build houses in Ecuador, and she didn't even like finish elementary school, but she's good with math. Let me tell you, that woman built wealth at at her 525 minimum wage job. And a negative, I used to think about my accent, and I used to think about the fact that I didn't like my accent. And although people tell me, oh, you don't have an accent, I say I do. I hear it when I'm talking and I'm nervous. I hear my accent. But instead, I started focusing on the fact and like owning the fact that I am an immigrant, and that's part of my identity. And I think that kind of helped me make my own space and offering a point of view that maybe other people didn't have. And that sets me apart. And instead of seeing it as something that it's detrimental to my career, I start seeing it as something that would add and give a different perspective out there in the world. So brand yourself, figure out, sell yourself. That's what you do. That's what you do. That's how you gotta do it, so that you can build your brand. You have something to offer. There's nothing wrong with being out there with like shouting out your accomplishments, talking about the things that you overcame, because that's what makes your journey unique.
Yeah, I think accents are beautiful, is that they, like you said, lady, they represent, like they're part of your identity, they're part of like your journey. Like they say a lot about a person, and like I just think they're beautiful in that sense. But yeah, thank you so much, lady, for being here. It was a great conversation. We're about to conclude the episode, so I wanted to ask if you have any final thoughts or anything that you want to add based on what you heard from the three of us. We would love to hear if you have anything more to add.
I think in any sense that you can, I always tell everyone to be very intentional with your time and your energy and who you give those two things to. And I say that with caution, because in Women's History Month and in general these days, self-care is like a hot topic. But I also have conflicting thoughts, because I think that the illusion of what self-care is something that comes from a place of privilege that not all women, especially immigrant women, have. So I try to remind myself and to anyone that will listen that there are no measurements or guidelines to what self-care can look like. And when offering any type of advice on self-care, I always try to do a privilege check. So for some women, self-care is being able to take a shower for a few extra minutes. And maybe it could be as simple as enjoying your cup of coffee at 5 a.m. with your coworkers before you have to start your shift. But it's important to recognize that self-care may not be something that's attainable to all or all the time. And it's hard to focus on your self-care and your mental well-being if you're worried that your rent is not being paid this month or that your utilities are going to be shut off. So sometimes self-care is asking for help to address whatever your immediate need is at that time. And that's when society really needs to step in and recognize that there are systemic barriers that continue to be a burden for immigrant women and for all women everywhere. Lack of affordable childcare, lack of affordable healthcare. Those are all things that are in the larger context of society that you might have a little bit of control over, but you don't have full control over. And those are all things that are affecting how and whether you can even focus on your own mental well-being and on taking care of yourself. How can you focus on being good mentally and being, on your mental well-being and being there for your children, being a good mother, a good worker, if you don't have any sick days to take at work and you woke up feeling, really sick? I get really bad sinus infections. And if I wouldn't be able to take a sick day just to kind of heal from that a little bit, just rest, then that makes a difference. But that's not a reality for everyone. There's people that really don't have any type of paid time off, or they might be working for cash. So for them, I'm losing out one day of work means I'm not going to be able to make rent this month, and I'm not going to be able to pay my utility bill. So when I say be intentional with your time and with your energy, I said that cautiously because I know that that's something that not everyone has the opportunity to do. And those are real societal issues that women everywhere face, and especially women of color, women that are part of underserved communities. And we need to find more support for that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lady, for bringing up this point. I think that was very important to talk about. And what helps me personally is keeping a gratitudes journal. So I try to write down 3 gratitudes per day. And when I look at that list that I combined over, say, the past month, I wrote down 3 gratitudes per day. And then I look at that huge list and I'm like, oh, I have so much to be grateful for. And it gives me hope and positivity. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not very good with keeping up with my journal, but I try, and I encourage other people to try as well because it really does help.
I think you guys have definitely given me a lot to think about tonight, especially with checking my own privilege. So I appreciate any chance I get to do that. Thank you, Lady, for joining us tonight. I appreciate you taking the time to spend with us for this episode. Thank you, Sherouk and Ali, for joining us too.
Happy International Women's Month. Why don't you all go to our Instagram? Why don't you go follow it? And on top of that, why don't you go and scan the QR code and put in our link tree donations to direct action donors, so that way you can support women who need education in these underserved communities, places that don't allow women to have education, or girls, especially these organizations that are helping women in immigrant spectrums and countries that are outside of our reach, which means they're outside of our privilege scope.
And with that, I think that I again want to say happy International Women's Month to trans women, to Indigenous women, to Black women, queer women, all the women out there. This is your month to support yourself, to love yourself, and to be at peace with who you are, at least for a little bit.
Happy Women's History Month, everybody. To all the women listening, to Lady Diana, Ali, and myself, thank you all for being here and for such a great conversation. And we will see everybody in the next episode. 1, 2, 3. Happy Women's History Month.